So what we're going to do is look at that trig number 1 quiz. So given a point on a terminal arm, figure out the ratios. So first we'll draw the diagram. So x is -5, y is -√75, and we have a hypotenuse. And we figure out the length of the hypotenuse, and that's from the Pythagorean theorem, right? And that simplifies to 10. So now we can write out the cast rule, because we're going to need that as well. And we know that that's theta. So we can figure out sine theta. And we know that sine theta is going to be a negative because it's down in the t quadrant. We also need cos theta, that'll be negative. We need tan theta, that'll be positive. Cosecant will be negative, secant will be negative, and cotan will be positive. So now sine theta, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, right? So that means √75 over 10. And we can simplify √75. We can say that that's √25 times √3 over 10, and √25 is actually 5. And then 5 over 10 simplifies to be √3 over 2. So sine theta is just -√3 over 2. So cos theta is just adjacent over hypotenuse, so -5 over 10, which simplifies to -1 over 2. Tan theta is going to be opposite over adjacent, so 75 over 5. And again, 75 simplifies to 5 roots of 3, and 5 over 5 cancels out to √3. Cosecant, because I already know sine, cosecant can just be the reciprocal, 2 over √3. Secant is just going to be the reciprocal of cos. Oh, sorry, I have to rationalize secant. So multiply both the top and the bottom by √3. And we get -2 roots of 3 over 3. Secant can just be the reciprocal of 1 over 2, which is 2 over 1, or just 2. And cotan will be the reciprocal of tan, so 1 over √3. And I can multiply both the top and the bottom by √3. And now, to figure out the value of theta, we can, we have to rationalize again, and that's √3 over 3. Okay, so to determine the value of theta, well, we can recognize any of the ratios. So sine theta is -1/2, for example. And that means the theta has to be pi by 6, because sine theta is 1/2, but it's in quadrant 3. So that means theta is actually 7 pi by 6, right? And you can look back at this cast diagram to try to figure that out. Okay, so theta is 7 pi by 6. All right, let's look at the other questions. So for question A, sine -5 pi by 6, we want to figure out the ratio. So of course we want to draw the diagram. -5 pi by 6 is there. The related acute angle is pi by 6, and we have our cast rule. So we know that sine is going to be negative because we're in the t quadrant. So we're looking for a negative answer. And we know that the related angle is pi by 6, so the value is going to be the same as sine pi by 6. So to figure out sine pi by 6, we have this triangle. We have pi by 6 and pi by 3, and we have the lengths of the sides. So now sine pi by 6 is just opposite over opposite over hypotenuse. So it's 1 over 2, but it's negative because of the quadrant. And that's it. Let's look at the next one. Cot 3 pi by 2. 3 pi by 2 is right there. And it's on the axis. So we need to remember that the definition of tan theta is y over x. Right? Or sine over cos, and sine is y and cos is x. So once we have that definition, we can remember that that point right there is 0, -1. And instead of tan, we're actually looking for cotan. So it's x over y. So the x value is 0, and the y value is -1. So we have 0 over -1, which is 0. So cotan 3 pi by 2 is 0. Right? And that's just through kind of thinking things through. Okay. Next question. Determine theta. And we couldn't have more than one answer, right? So first, since I know that it's 1 over √3, I know that this is the triangle that I need to draw. Now the angles in there are pi by 3 and pi by 6. So that means that we're looking at opposite over adjacent. because tan is opposite over adjacent. So that means that 1 is opposite and root 3 is adjacent, because 1 is at top and root 3 is on the bottom. So 1 is opposite, which means that the angle that we're looking for is actually pi by 6, and that's theta. So theta is pi by 6, right? However, if we draw the cast rule, we have an answer in the A quadrant, that's good, but also tan is positive, so we have an answer in the T quadrant. So that means that aside from pi by 6, theta could also be 7 pi by 6 as well. Okay? So there's our two answers. For the next one, we have secant theta is negative 2 over root 3. So there's our triangle again. 1, 2, and root 3. Pi by 3 and pi by 6. So we know that cos theta has to be the reciprocal of secant, right? So root 3 over 2. And cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that means that root 3 is adjacent and 2 is hypotenuse. So the thing that root 3 is adjacent to is pi by 6. So that means pi by 6 is not really theta, but it's actually theta's related acute angle, right? So if we go ahead and draw the cast rule, we have that pi by 6 is in quadrant 1, but really I need a negative answer for cos, so that gives me answers in quadrant 2 and 3. So one of them I've drawn out there, and there's the other one. And that makes theta 5 pi by 6, because it's full pi, but take away pi by 6, because that's the related acute angle. So we're left with 5 pi by 6, and then the other answer is 7 pi by 6, because it's into the third quadrant. Okay? So there's our answers. Number 4. State another value of theta for which the following is true. So, if we look at our diagram, there's theta, 15 pi over 17. It's a little bit less than a full pi, so that means less than half a rotation. And I know that in there is 2 pi by 17. And by the cast rule, I know that secant is negative in the quadrant where 15 pi by 17 is, so that means I'm looking for another place where secant is going to be negative. Well, that's down in the tan quadrant, right? So that means that I'm looking for another angle in that quadrant, which means it'll be pi plus 2 pi by 17, which is 19 pi by 17. So that's another theta that'll work. For B, there's negative 5 pi by 8. Remember, I'm rotating the wrong way because of that negative sign right there. And so there it is. And I draw my cast rule, and the related acute angle is 3 pi by 8. Right? So that's the related acute angle. Now let's think about the signs. Well, this is negative, right? Because we're in the T quadrant. So that means that I actually want sine theta to be positive. And that's because I have a negative right there, which will match this negative, and then everything will work out. So that means that I'm looking for an answer in either A or S quadrant, because I want sine theta to be positive. So that means theta is either 3 pi by 8 or theta is 5 pi by 8. But you just need one of those answers. You don't need both, but you can give me either one. They're both right. Okay? Okay. Number 5, determine the exact value of sine pi by 4, cos 11 pi by 6 minus cot 5 pi by 3. Well, let's split them up into 3 parts. So the first part, sine pi by 4, I draw my triangle, and it's 1 over root 2. The second part, cos 11 pi by 6, is in quadrant 4, where the cos is positive. So I draw my triangle, pi by 6 is there, and I have that cos 11 pi by 6 is root 3 over 2. Finally, cot 5 pi by 3, I know that that's 1 over tan 5 pi by 3. If I draw 5 pi by 3, it gives me this diagram with the related acute angle being pi by 3. And I know that there, I'm in the C quadrant, which means tan is negative. Right? So tan's negative, so that means that there's my angle, 1, 2, and root 3, and tan 5 pi by 3 is equal to opposite over adjacent, which is root 3 over 1, but it's negative, so negative root 3. So that means that cot 5 pi by 3 is negative 1 over root 3. And now I combine them all. And I have part 1 times part 2 minus part 3. Now I simplify a little bit, and now I have to rationalize the denominators. So I'll multiply the first part by root 2 on both sides, and I get root 6 over 2. Multiply the second part by root 3 on both sides, and I get root 3 over 3. I get a common denominator of 6, and there's my final answer. 3 roots of 6 plus 2 roots of 3 over 6. Okay, so that's number 5. And number 6, sine 2 pi is cos x. First, represent 2 pi as the difference between pi over 2 and an angle. So let's do that first. 2 pi over 5 is pi over 2 minus another angle. Let's figure out what that angle is. It's pi by 2 minus 2 pi by 5. Common denominator. And simplify, we get pi by 10. So now apply a cofunction identity. So sine 2 pi by 5 is equal to sine pi by 2 minus pi by 10. And the cofunction identity says that's the same as cos pi by 10. And this all comes from the identity that sine pi by 2 minus theta is the same as cos theta. So here is my theta, and now that fits that identity. So therefore x is equal to pi by 10. Okay? And finally, determine the exact value of cos 11 pi by 12. So 11 pi by 12 can be split up into 8 pi and 3 pi over 12. Well, the reason why I chose 8 and 3 is because they can be simplified. So they simplified to 2 pi by 3 and pi by 4. And now using this identity, I can rewrite this whole thing as cos 2 pi by 3 cos pi by 4 minus sine 2 pi by 3 sine pi by 4. And now we just have to calculate each part using special triangles, and I'll leave it for you to check that this is negative a half, this is 1 over root 2, this is root 3 over 2, and this is 1 over root 2. Now if I just multiply both parts, I get this. They already have a common denominator, so I can collect that. And now I can rationalize by multiplying both the top and the bottom by root 2, and I end up with negative root 2 minus root 6 over 4. And that's it. We're done. So that was a pretty lengthy quiz, but everything you need to know is on there.